have any additives in foods for her when she was little. And she's now 30 and she's 6 feet tall, so I think we were successful. But so I was actually doing some canning that cost me more to can than going to the store and buying the generic brand or things on sale. And again, you need to think about that from the economic side of it. Right. But you know, from my side of it, I wanted to make sure I knew exactly what was in the food. I knew it came out of my garden. I knew how it was handled. But that's a personal philosophy. So again, canning is a personal philosophy as well.
Well, I have had good experiences with the ugly fruit that the farmers don't want to put out on their table. And so if you go to our amazing Bloomington Farmers Market and you talk to the farmer with tons and tons of peaches and say, hey, do you have any seconds? And often I find the seconds of peaches and apples are even tastier because they're even more ripe. They're not as pretty, but they're amazing to can with.
Exactly.
And so in that case, you're saving up to half, even more, on the cost of the fruit. And so you're definitely economically and ecologically making a difference.
You're not making as big a carbon footprint.
Right. Exactly.
And so we're working the green into all this process as well. And who knew when our grandmothers and great-grandmothers were doing this out of necessity that they were setting up a program that allowed us to do this.
Right.
So that's my phone. That the blanching is done, or this is a blanching pot, and we're going to use this when we freeze as well, so that I don't want to confuse you, but I'm using it right now simply to be able to hopefully get the skins off these peaches. I won't guarantee it this morning, but another piece that I always use is I use a lot of newspaper when I can. Again, because I have a compost pile and compost bin, so whatever gets left on the newspapers, I get rolled up, put it in my compost bin, and I just add to my compost, and I have wonderful gardens that way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hopefully get a peach that I can peel the skin, and when peaches are ripe, you can actually put them into this hot water just like you would tomatoes or anything that's got a thick skin that you don't want to have in your canning jar. And then you just peel it off. And instead of having to peel it with a knife like I'm having to do now because the skin isn't really ripe, these peaches needed to sit out a couple more days.
Mine that I got this summer from the farmer's market, the skins just dropped right off, even in the pot.
Even in the pot. Now you don't want to cook the peach as such, but what you want to do is be able to get it just enough that the peel will come right off. But you could see from the top, see how easy it peels right there? That's the way it would peel all the time on a fully ripe peach. But then what you want to do is, and I'll just real quick peel this so that we can put it in the jar. The magic of television is that when you're peeling like this, now because I'm having to peel this, if I were at home, I would be putting this into a bowl and saving it, because then this would become peach jelly.
That's something it seems like we've lost a little recently, is the ability to make complete use of all of the things
everything, exactly,
that we eat, especially in our foods. So.
And so what we need to do then is I'm going to make sliced peaches, and so I'm going to use my jar, and because these are slippery little dudes, I'll be able to put them into the jar without the jar filler. Now when we get to the point of, and I'm not going to take the whole time to fill the jar, but you can see what we're doing is we're just laying them in. And when, of course, I've been involved at the Monroe County Fair for many years, and when the canned goods come in for the fair to be judged, they don't just flop them in the jar like I'm doing, but rather they lay them in the jar so they all lay really, really pretty. And I've seen some jars that it amazes me how much time they must have done in the packing process.
Wow.
We had some Roma tomatoes one year that not one seed showed, and all of the tomatoes were perfect.
Wow.
And I was just in admiration of that person's ability to do that. But what you want to do is pack them in the jar, and then what we're going to do with that, Stephanie, is then there's always the question, just like with apples or anything else, that when we are working with fruit that turns brown in the air, one of the things is that we're going to have to do something to those peaches, or they're going to look pretty brown and icky. They're going to still be, they'll taste good, but they just don't look good.
Right.
And most of us eat by our eyes.
Right.
We want to see it look pretty. So there's two choices. You can either use what we refer to as ascorbic acid, which is in a powder form, and it's very easy to find in the spice shelf at the grocery store, and this one happens to be Fruit Fresh. We try not to promote brand names, but this happens to be the only one that's commonly in any store in Bloomington.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a powder form. And so you can actually, if you want to, you can put this, sprinkle it on like you would any kind of sugar or anything like that, and stir it in a bowl with the peaches, and then just put hot water on. What I did this morning was I've made some sugar syrup water that this is light sugar, what they refer to as a light syrup. Now notice how the peaches are already beginning to float because the jar's not full. If I filled that jar completely and then poured the peaches in, and then poured the sauce in, I wouldn't have that floating process. But one of the things we always need to remember to do is get the air bubbles out.
Right.
And so the air bubbles can be taken care of by taking a plastic knife, not a metal knife.
Why is it so important to get the air bubbles out?
Because the air bubbles are one of the things that will cause it not to seal well.
Oh, okay.
And we have to use a plastic knife rather than a metal knife because we don't want to scratch the glass.
Right.
And so a lot of times it's very easy to grab a dinner knife to poke it down all the way through, but keep a plastic knife out. And what you're going to do is you're going to work the air bubbles out of the side and get the bubbles to the top so they'll break. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a paper towel or a very clean dishcloth, and you're going to wipe the top rim to make sure you have no residue on it. And then you will have warmed your lid to put the lid on and then put the ring on, and then you're ready to put it into a hot water bath. Now I have peaches that I've already processed.
All right.
And this is what they look like when it's all done. And somebody's going to say, but wait a minute, Sue, you've got a pretty top on it. Pretty tops make no difference with the food safety of the product. It's simply a matter that it's fun to have the colors, especially if you're going to give these as gifts.
Yeah.
They're great ways
gifts.
to gifts.
Very
and
economical.
So this is a finished product. This is what it looks like before it goes in the canner. And so you can use ascorbic acid. You might use lemon juice, but I don't like to because it makes a sour taste.
Yeah.
And especially with grandchildren, I don't want them to be turned off by foods that don't taste like they're supposed to taste like.
Right.
And then you can always use sugar syrup. And sugar syrup recipes are in your cookbooks. Make sure you've got an up-to-date canning cookbook because the times have changed as far as processing times.
Okay.
And also the amount of syrup, sugar, water combinations have changed because now that we have so many foods coming from other countries and from unknown sources, it used to be that you only canned what you grew in your garden and you knew what you put in your garden, you knew what your soil was like, you knew how it got handled from the garden to the kitchen, and now we don't have that option as easily. And so that's why the changes have been made.
Okay.
And I quite often get calls from ladies who have canned forever and ever, and could be my grandma, and they say, but we always did it in the oven. Well, in the olden days, the oven was okay because the sources of the food, the cleanliness of the kitchen was much higher than we have it right now.
Yeah.
And we all think, oh, we keep a clean kitchen. But when you think about the fact that most of us don't cook a full breakfast, a full dinner, a full supper, and scrub the floors every day.
Right.
Not this kid, anyway.
No, not this one either.
And so, it's very easy to introduce bacteria that we don't even know is there. And so that the old ways of doing things are not necessarily wrong for the times that they did it, but rather it's wrong for today's times.
Right.
And so make sure that you've got up-to-date information, and that's why we have the publications at the Extension Office. And they're available at Mother Hubbard's Cupboard as well because we do projects together.
Yeah.
But it's really important to do that. So I'm going to send Stephanie off with some of the equipment and thinking about I'll finish up with some of the things we need to remember with canning, and we'll be ready to do another segment of our program on putting foods by. Remember that we need to have clean equipment. We need to use specific canning type jars. Remember not to use any of the jars with wire bales and rubber gaskets because they just don't seal properly. Those are the kinds of things you can use for your dry goods. I use my half-gallon jars that I found somewhere, and they're my canisters, and I keep my flowers in it. I keep my my different kinds of sweeteners in it.